everyone. Welcome to At Home Family Catechesis. Today, we're going to talk about the Eucharist. The Eucharist is one of the things that makes us Catholics Catholic, and it's such an important part of our teachings. What is the Eucharist? We're going to talk about different questions regarding the Eucharist, and the first one that makes the most sense to talk about is, what is it? What is the Eucharist? The Eucharist, also called communion, is Christ's body, blood, soul, and divinity truly present in the bread and wine that has been consecrated by the priest. When does a transformation take place? So, how does a piece of bread and a glass of wine become Jesus Christ himself? It's through what we call transubstantiation. So the bread and wine that we bring to the altar at the beginning of Mass is merely bread and wine. But it is through the power of the Holy Spirit using the priest during a moment of consecration that bread and wine become Christ's body and blood. Do I need to receive communion in both forms? This is a question I get all of the time. And the answer is no, because Christ is fully present in both species, as we call them, of the bread and the wine, the body and the blood. Christ is fully there. So whether you get an entire host or the smallest crumb, Jesus is fully present there. For a lot of people who have a gluten intolerance or celiac disease, under normal circumstances, they would receive just the blood of Christ and not the body. But Christ is fully present there. Have you ever noticed at Mass that Father Dan will take the paten, the gold plate that the large host is placed on, and he'll wipe it down and wipe any of those crumbs into the chalice, and then he pours water into the chalice, swishes it around and drinks that? It's because we don't want to leave behind any part of Jesus in the Eucharist. Because within every crumb, within every drop, Jesus is fully present. The last thing we want to do is to throw him away or let him be discarded. Now, we're in a pandemic at the moment, but a lot of times you will see people who receive communion on the tongue. And part of that is because they don't want any crumbs to get left in their hand and to fall to the floor. It's just one more way that we show Jesus how much we love him and appreciate him in the Eucharist. How do we show respect for the Eucharist? Speaking of respect for the Eucharist, there's a lot of ways that we show respect and show that we really truly believe that Jesus is present, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist. Did you know that when you genuflect before you get into the pew, you're genuflecting before the tabernacle, the place where Christ in the Eucharist is kept? If you ever go to St. Andrew, you'll see people who will turn to their right and genuflect, because that's where the tabernacle's at in that church. We're not genuflecting to the altar, we bow to the altar. But we take a knee in respect for Christ in the Eucharist. But speaking of bowing, when we go to receive communion, and the Eucharistic minister or the priest holds up the body or the blood and says the very words, the body of Christ, the blood of Christ, we bow. Christ is being raised before us. We need to remind ourselves and show with our bodies that we respect that. Speaking of the chalice, have you ever noticed that they're made of precious metals? Here at St. Elizabeth, ours are gold. And if you look at the inside of the tabernacle where Jesus is kept in the Eucharist, it's also gold. Another sign of our respect and love for Jesus. It's kind of like when you have guests come over and you want to give the best that you have. You bring out your best dishes, you offer them all that you have to show them how much you love and respect them. And that's what we do with our gold ciboriums, the bowls, and chalices, the cups. Lastly, we can show respect for the Eucharist, for Jesus Christ present there, in what we call Eucharistic adoration. This is when we take the Eucharist, communion, that consecrated host, and we put it into what's called a monstrance. It's a beautiful way that we can see the Eucharist and pray to Jesus before him. Josh Bauer said in one of our other videos that we are fleshy beings, we are people, we're physical. And so Christ comes to us physically. And while he's present with us always and everywhere, he's present to us in a special way in the Eucharist. We have Eucharistic adoration offered during Lent on Fridays from 12:30 until 6 p.m. So when our noon Mass ends until Stations of the Cross begin. I encourage you to come and check it out. If it's really Jesus, why does it still look and taste like bread and wine? Well, it's one of the great mysteries of the Church, and I have to say, a huge blessing in my opinion. I don't know about you, but I would feel uncomfortable receiving actual flesh and actual blood. But God, in his greatness, can give us himself in the way that he chooses. If we look in the Gospel of John, chapter 6, what we call the Bread of Life discourse, this is where Jesus tells his disciples, unless you eat of the flesh of the Son of Man and drink of his blood, you shall not have life within you. That sounds awfully crazy. And so the disciples asked him, you mean this symbolically, right? And Jesus looked back at them and he used more expressive language. He could have at that point said, I'm just speaking symbolically. But instead, he made his language all the more graphic, all the more intense. And he said, you need to eat. But he didn't just say eat. He used the word that for us in English would be comparable to the word gnaw. He was very serious when he said that this is what we are called to do. And it tells us in the gospel that he lost so many of his disciples that day. Once again, another chance for Jesus to look and say, wait, come back. It's symbolic. And he didn't, reminding us that it really truly is his body, his blood, soul, and divinity, all present for us. Now, I will say there have been hundreds of what we call Eucharistic miracles. And you can find more than 100 of these actually documented. There's a great website I posted on Google Drive, and there's even a story about one of the greatest Eucharistic miracles that I had ever heard of. A lot of times, we struggle to understand this mystery of our faith. And priests even struggle sometimes. In one famous Eucharistic miracle, a priest was praying during the consecration and was really struggling to believe that it was truly God. The host turned into flesh. The blood turned into actual blood. God revealed himself in a very mighty way to this priest to say, I am here presently. And if you learn more about this miracle, the craziest thing is that the host, when scientists looked at it, it's a piece of the human heart. Christ giving his very heart to us. What if I'm struggling to believe this teaching? Well, as my little story about the Eucharistic miracle says, you're not alone. Whether you're 4 or 40, this can be a hard thing to understand. As humans, we want our brain to fully comprehend what it is going on. God's telling us it's still going to be a mystery. So what I suggest is first, admit that you're struggling with it. And then secondly, pray. If we look in the Gospel of Mark, we see a father who's asking Jesus to heal his son. He says, if you can. And Jesus says, if I can do all things. And the father looks at Jesus and he says, I do believe. Help my unbelief. What a beautiful prayer. That's the same prayer that we can pray. Lord, I want to believe. Help me to believe. Help me to overcome my doubts. Help me to love you more and to see you present in the Eucharist. Another thing for us to think about was actually given to us by St. Ambrose many years ago. He says, could not Christ's word, which can make from nothing what did not exist, change existing things into what they were not before? It is no less a feat to give things their original nature than to change their nature. In other words, if God spoke this very world into being, creating everything out of nothing, can't he do this? Can't he change the very substance of something while it still looks and tastes as it did before? God is so good. And he can do that, and he does. Who and when? So who should receive communion? Practicing Catholics who are in good standing, free from mortal sin, who have made their first communion, should receive communion when they go to Mass. If you bring someone along to Mass, which is a wonderful thing, if they're not Catholic, they really shouldn't be going up for communion. They need to have that same belief that it truly is Christ present to receive. And if they choose to enter the church, then they can fully participate. At the same time, if we go to church somewhere other than the Catholic Church, we should not receive communion there either, but should only receive it from the Catholic Church. When? When do we receive? Well, as I said, if you're in a state of mortal sin, you shouldn't receive communion. However, that does not change that we are still obliged to attend Sunday Mass and Mass on holy days. We just don't receive communion at those times. Sometimes it's impossible for us to get to confession before we can go to Mass. Sometimes, like now, it's not even possible for us to go to Mass. For a lot of people in other countries, they don't have the same opportunities that we do. We're used to being able to attend Mass every single Sunday, and even have the opportunity to go during the week if we so choose. But in other countries, they're lucky if they get Mass once a month. And so God calls us to receive communion, and the Church tells us that we should receive communion at least once a year to be a practicing Catholic, preferably during the Easter season if you can. When I ask you how often should we receive, the simplest answer is as often as possible. There's so much grace that is poured out on us, sacramental grace, when we receive communion. When we take Christ's body, blood, soul, and divinity into our very own bodies. When I'm talking with my friends, we think about how the Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches us that the Eucharist is the source and summit of the Christian life, of our Catholic faith. And we really truly believe that if everyone in the church understood that it really is Jesus, no one would ever leave the church. How can you turn away from such a precious gift? I know that many of you right now can't receive the Eucharist and aren't able to attend Mass yet. And my heart longs for you to come back and join us when you're able. Until then, I ask that you pray an act of spiritual communion. I posted 2 of these on Google Drive, but you can write and make your own. You can also spend time in adoration. As I said before, during Lent, we're offering Eucharistic adoration every Friday after noon Mass until Stations of the Cross begin at 6:00 p.m. If you're not coming into the church yet, that's okay. Hop on YouTube. There are so many different adoration chapels that you can plug into. In fact, there's even a video on Google Drive of our very own chapel in which I recorded a holy hour. Spend time with Jesus in the Eucharist. If you're struggling to believe, you're not alone, but pray for God to help you to believe. He wants you to have this gift. He wants everyone to receive this gift. And that's why he gives it as often as he does. Let us take advantage of it whenever we can.